Today is Wednesday, September 19th, 2012, and today's topic I'm going to discuss what I think about suffering. Now, suffering is a very interesting subject when it comes to life in general and when it comes to living and when it comes to not really living at times too. Now, suffering it's a very, very wide range of what can be depicted as suffering. For instance, is suffering illness? Is an illness what makes you suffer? Or is persecution what makes you suffer? Is depression what makes you suffer? I mean, all of these things we could probably say yes to some form, and there are some people who would be like, I have cancer, but it's not beating me. I mean, I'm in stage 4B, but I love my life, and I'm not really suffering. I'm just enjoying what I have left. So, suffering. Suffering is a very interesting subject. I mean, when it comes to me personally, I know that in many ways that you can, there are many ways of depression that can legitimately make you feel worthless. That can make you feel inadequate. That can make you feel like you weren't good enough for the people around you. You weren't good enough for the things that you held high. And for a long time for me, I've never had a really great self-confidence type situation, and that continues to be built on. That continues to build up in many ways. It continues to affect my day-to-day life. I mean, in high school, I would always try for things. For instance, I was always trying to be the best at everything, but I was never the best at everything. I would try being great at wrestling, and I never got past good. My mental minds would go into different places, basically defeating itself from being able to win. And, that had an effect on a lot of things. So it's almost like being afraid to succeed at times. And is that mentality a form of suffering? Maybe. I mean, it continues to build, and then it even brings up to a point of where, like, at points in my life where I've been very, very, I've been suicidal, and it's really hard to grasp and really hard to admit at times that you've looked back at your life and that it wasn't necessarily like the worst of lives, but you realize that you were in a position where you felt so alone, so desperate for help, and yet I'm still here. And that's a form of suffering. Feeling that loneliness, that incomparable feeling of, should it end here? Or should I move on? Now, it's one of those things to continue to look on when you look past that situation. Now, moving past suicide and whatnot, you take a look at the bigger picture at times. When you're in the midst of your suffering, sometimes something that is so beyond your world is what kind of refocuses you. Now, let's take for instance, I don't know, religious persecution. Now you see in the Islamic religion that a lot of people in the United States, because of the attacks of 9/11, a lot of Muslims are persecuted in many ways. As much as a lot of people would love to say, no, 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 That's not because of 9/11. It is. And in many big ways, Muslims are all just looked as a negative. A lot of Muslims are looked off in a negative tone just because of that. And that's unfair. Because in many ways, the Islamic religion, it, I mean, it elevates Allah to a whole new level. I mean, it's in reality a monotheistic religion, and Judaism believes that, Christianity believes that, and yet the Islamic faith is something that's just scrutinized in many ways. I mean, you take a look at certain people. I mean, a good reference in modern day pop culture is a girl that tried out for the Glee project. She was a Turkish Muslim, and she was afraid of the flack that she's going to get from her parents. That they learned that she kissed a boy. And she's in high school. She kissed a boy. No, I lied. She's not in high school. You have to be 18 or older. She graduated high school. And she kissed a boy. I mean, okay, parents have a big say in your lives, but to feel the oppression still, I'm really going to feel the flack from this, even though I'm an adult. I mean, there's a lot of forms of suffering, and then you go into things of, religious persecution, and it's just like, wow, I'm being condemned for everything I do. You could go into obvious areas of being condemned by social groups and whatnot, and it would be ludicrous to say, well, because this one person takes a stance against what I believe, I'm suffering. But in a way, it is still a form of persecution. And to what level are you going to be letting it become suffering, or really letting it affect your life? Now, suffering can be something that controls you, and suffering is something that you can lead your life with. And at other times, it's something that you can't even run away from. I mean, take a look at the Christian religion, where it talks in the book of James, and consider it all joy, my brethren, when you endure suffering. I mean, it's not saying you might endure suffering. You will endure suffering. You're going to endure hard times. You're going to endure persecution. So, what an exciting message to hear. Consider it pure joy in all the suffering that we have, because it's what makes us stronger. It's what makes us who we are today. Now, is there a possibility to get consumed by suffering? Who knows? I mean, that's all up to each individual person. And at the same time, I mean, of course, we have these these PSAs on TV that make us look at our lives here in America, or make us look at our lives that don't revolve around waiting to eat for one time per day, or every other day, or once a week. I mean, we actually get to eat 5, 6, up to 10 times a day if we really wanted to. And even the poorest of poor, they get support from our government at times just to be on welfare. So, what does that mean? Suffering in America is different than the suffering in the third world countries? Or is suffering something that's really affecting us? I mean, a lot of people could venture to say, oh, we don't suffer. We don't have suffering. The suffering is all what can bring you down to a level of so much pain that it just affects everything you do. And the fact of the matter is, at times, people hide their suffering. You have family members that are like, I have cancer. I'm not gonna let anyone know. Yes, I've lost my energy, and I tend to be a lot sleepier these days, but I'm not letting anyone know that my cancer is beating me. I may be suffering, but it is not something that I need to share with everyone. And suffering can be very inward and very personal. And then there are other times when you just see suffering, when you walk down the halls of hospitals and you just hear moaning and crying and hard breathing for people just grasping onto life. And it's very, very touching and very, very... It's a sterile environment that makes you just feel and recognize where you are in your life. Now, is suffering something that's meant to teach us? I believe so. Suffering comes in all different capacities, and it depends on who you are as a person. Do you be suffering? Do you show suffering? Do you let it control who you are? And that's where you have to look at suffering. Suffering is something that can just completely consume someone. And then there's other times where suffering can consume you, but you're not letting it outwardly show. And what is suffering to you? Is it being called a Bible thumper? Is it being called a terrorist because you're a Muslim? Is it being called fat because you're not the skinniest of people? Is it being called a twig because, unfortunately, you were so tall and got the genes of being so skinny? Is it because of the fact that you are a geek and you love video games and you love all kinds of silly stuff at times in your life where you feel like, wow, this is funny? Or are you receiving parts of your life where you get kicked out of your house at the age of 12, where you're jumping from foster home to foster home, where your mother died, your father's died, your best friend no longer likes you, you endure the pain of religious persecution by being gay, by choosing to be no longer a male but being a female instead. You know, there are so many things that we can be persecuted for, and so many things that can cause suffering. Now, the way we take it and the way it affects us is how we live, and that's what we need to learn from suffering. Something that can plague our entire existence, but how we react to it is how we affect our life and the lives around us.